Well, at the same time, the Southern Association of Colleges, now called the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, developed standards for school accreditation, which included library standards, and involved the Southeastern Library Association in defining standards for libraries and curriculum requirements for educating school librarians. Now, Dr. Goldstein, if he knew this, he didn't mention this in his article, but it was this recommended curriculum that had been cooperatively developed throughout the Southeast that was the nucleus of the library education program at FSCW by 1946-47, when the School of Library Training and Service was established. And that program essentially was carried right over into the new school and stayed there for many years as a nucleus for an expanded curriculum. Well, in 1944-45, I went to Columbia University for another year's study. When I returned early that next year, President Campbell called and asked me to come to his office for an appointment. Now, some of you, not many of you here, would know what that meant. Charlie Grigg remembers. But if he sent for you, you got there fast, because, you know, he didn't normally do this, and you didn't know if you were here to stay or gone tomorrow. But he couldn't have been more direct. He said, "We have a dilemma, and we need to take some action." He pointed out that FSCW's library science program was small, and I remember he said rather disdainfully 4 or 5 students, and not likely to grow as it was presently administered. He accused me and my friends of stirring up library development. And he said this had resulted in unreasonable demands for qualified librarians, and that the college was not producing people to fill these positions, and that we just had to do something about it. He said it was clear that Florida needed a library school, and he said, meaning himself, I wanted it at FSCW. And before I could say me too, you know, which was readily on the tip of my tongue, he looked me dead in the eye and he said, "We're going to have it." And then he said, "Do you want to be the dean?" Without blinking or any hesitation, I said, "No, sir, I never want to be a dean." And that was a good answer for me. I did say that I enjoyed teaching and consulting, and I'd like to help with the new school. His next question came very quickly. I think he was somewhat relieved that I didn't want to be the new dean. He said, "Do you know Louis Shores?" I told him I knew who he was, but I had never met him since he had been away in the military for several years. And I told him I knew that Dr. Shores had written a great book on reference, but I had never really studied that book, because at Columbia you studied Winchell and Mudge, you didn't study Shores. Well, Dr. Campbell then said, "If you have no objections, we'll get him." You know, this was before the days of democratic administration. And he meant he'd get him, and he did. He didn't have to clear this with any committee or any search committee, or there wasn't any library school to clear with. And we had only a state board of control that operated Florida State University, not the whole system. So he knew how to work with state board of control. He was really a master at that. And he just said, "You give me a brief paper stating the rationale for having a school and having it here." And he said, "Leave the rest to me." Well, I did. And very shortly, as Harold Goldstein reported, the School of Library Training and Service was established for the beginning of the academic year 1946-47. Dr. Campbell chose the name of the new school over my objections, and later the objections of Dr. Shores. He was eager. He called it the School of Library Training and Service. There was nothing in that I really objected to, except I thought training sounded like dogs. You know, I had read psychological studies where they were always talking about the training of dogs or the training of rats. And I just didn't like having that as the name for the new school. But anyway, he was eager to state his hope that the school would be a service agency as well as a training center. And he clarified the difference, and he wanted to be sure that was in the title, and that's how that name came to be. Well, we agreed that we should continue the undergraduate program and begin the graduate program, that we should attempt some articulation between them. And I felt strongly about this because I'd been to 3 other institutions where there was no articulation, and I would have the same classes taught over and over, and sometimes they were graduate and sometimes they were undergraduate, and you couldn't tell the difference. And nobody knew how to articulate those programs. I'm not sure they do yet. We agreed that we should educate personnel for libraries of all types, and that we spelled out what they all were, and that we should be concerned about libraries of all sizes. So we were concerned about providing personnel for the smallest libraries as well as for the very largest libraries, and I think that was a wise decision. We agreed way back there that we should implement a concept of the library as a center for the dissemination of all types of materials, printed and audiovisual. And this was an amazing decision for that time. And then he said he saw the School of Library Training and Service as an educational agency offering consultant help, extension classes, workshops, and institutes. And this explains why he was so willing to turn me loose anytime anybody else would pay the bill to go out and do any and all of those things. Dr. Campbell then told me to go home and write the catalog material for the 1946-47 program. And I can remember I was somewhat taken back, but I never acted as if I couldn't do that. You know, that was not the proper time to do that. So I just went home and did it, and that's what's in the catalog. By fall, the school was established, the catalog was published, Dr. Shores was employed, and I was named assistant to the dean. It didn't take long. Dr. Shores came to the campus 4 times during that first year of our operation, and I don't know if this has been clear to everybody. He was already employed by Crollo Collier's publishing company to edit Collier's encyclopedia, and this was his first big project after his war years. So he would come down here and stay 3 or 4 days at a time, and he came, I think, 4 times that year. And he was not here full time until a year after his appointment as the dean. Now, I thought some of this might be of interest to you. I was named acting director of the program until the new dean arrived. We continued to operate on the top floor of the library, now Dodd Hall. Now, this wasn't simple because Miss Richardson was running that library, and we were on the top floor still, and she wasn't too happy about the change, but we made every effort to be extremely cooperative and nice, and she finally came around and was nice to us. We offered the same courses as before while we were planning for the future, and Dr. Shores was giving some direction to that planning. Miss Agnes Gregory, who had been employed in 1945 by Miss Richardson to teach in that old program, continued to teach in the new school,